If you think you've dealt with difficult people, wait until you hear these 61 absolutely unhinged, 100% real return complaints from the USA that prove the customer is actually insane. We're talking about a woman returning a winter coat years later because it shrank after she gained 40 pounds, and a guy trying to return a used camping toilet that was, let's just say, still full. These are authentic, documented retail nightmares that will make you question reality, so stick around for number 61 because it literally defies the laws of physics. Hit that follow button right now and let's dive into the madness. 1. A man walked into the surf shop soaking wet and slammed a high-end neoprene wetsuit onto the counter while demanding an immediate cash refund. He looked the cashier dead in the eye and claimed the product was completely defective because water was getting inside the suit while he was swimming in the ocean. The store manager tried to explain that wetsuits are literally designed to trap a thin layer of water to keep the body warm. The man started screaming that he expected to stay bone dry like a desert cactus while submerged in the Pacific. His girlfriend stood behind him, looking absolutely mortified as he ranted about the betrayal of waterproof technology. Do people really think a wetsuit acts like a giant human Ziploc bag? 2. A young man wearing a backwards cap marched into the sunglass boutique and tossed a pair of expensive aviators at the clerk with pure rage. He complained that these shades were a total scam because the sun was still way too bright when he stared directly into it at noon. The employee sat there in stunned silence, wondering if the guy was actually serious about mocking the laws of optics. He kept pointing at the sun and then his eyes while claiming the lenses should have turned the world into a dark movie theater. His buddies in the back were stifling laughs while he demanded a pair that could block out a literal star. Can you imagine trying to sue a company because you can't stare at a giant ball of fire? 3. An old man marched into a high-end clothing store, clutching a winter parka he had purchased 2 whole years ago while claiming the fabric was defective. He shouted at the young clerk that the coat had mysteriously shrunk in his closet over the summer, and it was now physically impossible to zip up. The manager stepped out and noticed the man had visibly gained about 40 pounds since his last visit, but the customer refused to accept his own body was the problem. He insisted the polyester fibers were possessed by a shrinking curse and demanded a brand new size to compensate for his emotional trauma. The surrounding shoppers stared in total disbelief as he tried to squeeze into the tiny jacket like a giant burst sausage. Is it really possible for a closet to have a secret gym that only works in reverse? 4. A tech-savvy teen stood at the electronics counter holding a high-end Wi-Fi router and looked completely disgusted as he demanded his money back immediately. He told the confused employee that the device was a total fraud because he could not see the blue internet signals floating in the air like they show in the commercials. The clerk tried to explain that radio waves are actually invisible to the human eye, but the kid was convinced he was being cheated out of a futuristic light show. He even pulled up a YouTube ad on his phone to prove that the air should be filled with glowing digital data streams. His dad stood behind him nodding in agreement while the store staff questioned if they were being pranked by a hidden camera crew. Do people truly believe that life comes with the same special effects as a 30-second television commercial? 5. A middle-aged woman stormed back to the fast food counter with a half-eaten carton of large fries and slammed them down next to the ketchup. She screamed that she wanted a full refund because the fries tasted way too much like actual potatoes, and it was ruining her entire lunch experience. The teenager behind the register stared at her with a blank expression, trying to comprehend how a potato product tasting like a potato was a valid health code violation. She claimed she usually eats processed junk that tastes like salty cardboard, and this authentic flavor was deeply offensive to her refined palate. Other customers in line started recording the meltdown as she demanded to speak to the corporate chef about this vegetable conspiracy. When did we reach the point where food tasting exactly like its main ingredient became a reason to call the police? 6. A frantic mother rushed into the toy aisle holding a plastic superhero action figure like it was a piece of radioactive waste and demanded a manager. She claimed her son had used the toy to hit his little sister over the head, and therefore the plastic figure was clearly possessed by a demonic spirit. The woman looked terrified while explaining that her sweet child would never act out unless the toy was whispering evil commands into his tiny ears. The store manager tried to suggest that maybe the kid just needed a timeout, but she insisted on an exorcism or a full cash refund. She refused to even touch the toy and made the clerk use a pair of tongs to move it into the return bin. Since when did a lack of parenting skills become a legitimate reason to blame a piece of molded Hasbro plastic? 7. An intense collector arrived at the hobby shop carrying a rare boxed figure and looked like he was about to burst into tears of pure rage. He pointed at a tiny price sticker the store had placed on the plastic window and claimed the weight of that sticker had ruined the structural integrity of the box. The owner offered to peel it off gently, but the man screamed that the microscopic pressure had already caused a permanent shift in the cardboard equilibrium. He started lecturing the entire store on the physics of collectible preservation while claiming his retirement fund was now completely flushed down the toilet. Everyone watching was wondering how a piece of paper weighing less than a feather could destroy a thick plastic casing. If a price tag can destroy your entire future, then is your investment really as solid as you think it is? 8. A very confused young woman stood in the grocery aisle holding a carton of almond milk and looked absolutely betrayed as she spoke to the dairy manager. She explained that she was lactose intolerant and was horrified to find the word milk printed on the label because she thought it was a trick. The manager patiently explained that almonds do not have udders and that the liquid inside was just crushed nuts and water, but she flatly refused to believe him. She kept asking where the almond cows were kept and why the government was allowed to lie to her about the source of her beverages. Her friend stood nearby trying to hide her face behind a loaf of bread, while the woman demanded a written apology from the company. How do you explain the concept of plant-based liquids to someone who thinks nuts are secretly tiny cows? 9. An eccentric aunt walked into the garden center with absolutely nothing in her hands and stood at the customer service desk with her chin held high. She told the clerk she wanted to return a dead houseplant she bought a month ago, but she had already thrown the physical plant into the trash. When the worker asked for the item, she got offended and said that bringing a dead body into a store was unhygienic and disrespectful to the plant's memory. She expected the store to just take her word for it and hand over the cash because she was a loyal customer with an honest face. The line behind her started growing as she argued that a receipt should be enough to prove the plant gave up on life. Can you really expect a refund for a ghost plant that is currently rotting in a local landfill? 10. A man walked up to the bakery counter, holding a completely empty cake box that had nothing inside but a single lonely crumb sitting in the corner. He told the baker that the expensive chocolate cake was far too dry to be edible, and he demanded his $60 back right that second. The baker pointed out that he had clearly managed to eat 99% of the cake, so it couldn't have been that bad to swallow. The customer argued that he only finished it because he was hungry, but he suffered through every single bite with a frown on his face. The people waiting for their birthday orders started laughing out loud as he tried to defend his logic with a straight face. If a cake is so terrible that you eat the entire thing, then do you actually deserve your money back? 11. A nervous auntie rushed into the home decor store clutching rolls of gothic-patterned wallpaper as if they were cursed artifacts from a horror movie. She slammed them on the counter and told the clerk that her pastor had officially banned the design from her house. Apparently, the swirls in the pattern were actually hidden gateways that would invite evil spirits to host a party in her living room. The poor teenage employee tried to explain that it was just gray ink and high-quality paper, but she insisted the walls were already starting to whisper. She demanded a full refund plus gas money for the spiritual danger she faced while driving with the rolls in her back seat. Neighbors at the store were backing away slowly while she prayed over the return receipt to cleanse the register. Do you think interior design is the new preferred method for ghosts to enter our suburban homes? 12. A frustrated dad pulled up to the auto parts store and stormed inside to return a set of high-intensity automotive headlights he bought the night before. He screamed that the bulbs were complete garbage because they did not shine bright enough to light up the specific house numbers on the street signs. The clerk explained that headlights are aimed at the road to prevent blinding other drivers, but the man wanted them to work like giant searchlights from a Batman movie. He claimed it was the store's fault he missed his turn for a dinner party, and he expected the company to pay for his wasted gas. Other mechanics in the shop were dying of laughter as he demonstrated how he had to lean out his window to see anything at all. Is it a product defect, or do you just need to learn how a map works? 13. A confused young woman marched into the stationery shop in the middle of February and threw a brand new calendar onto the desk with total authority. She told the store owner that the entire product was a scam because all the dates for the current week were completely wrong and misleading. The owner picked up the calendar and gently pointed out that she was staring at a version from the previous year that had been sitting in her kitchen. She refused to admit her mistake and instead claimed the store was selling time-traveling documents designed to make her late for her hair appointments. The customers in the greeting card aisle were clutching their sides as she demanded a calendar where the days matched her personal feelings. How do you manage to lose an entire year of your life and blame it on a piece of paper? 14. A corporate executive in an expensive suit arrived at the supply warehouse with 500 white lanyards from a recent tech conference and looked absolutely disgusted. He claimed the entire shipment was the wrong shade of beige and demanded a full replacement for his high-profile clients. The warehouse manager took one look at the fabric and realized the lanyards were actually bright white, but were now covered in brownish sweat stains and neck grime. The man insisted that his employees were pristine human beings and that the fabric must have naturally decomposed into a dirty tan color overnight. He stood there with his arms crossed while the staff tried to find a polite way to tell him his team was just incredibly sweaty. If you wear a white string around your neck in the summer heat, is it the manufacturer's fault when it turns brown? 15. A frantic grandmother called the tech support line and started screaming that the company website was completely broken and discriminating against her. She told the agent that she had been trying to click the add to cart button for over an hour, and nothing was happening on her screen. After 10 minutes of total confusion, the agent realized the woman was actually trying to click on a static screenshot her daughter had sent her in a text message. She refused to believe that a photo of a website was not the actual website and accused the company of stealing her internet finger strength. The agent had to put her on speakerphone so the entire office could hear her complain about the lack of digital response from a flat image. Have we reached a point where people think a picture of a sandwich should actually feed them? 16. An entitled man stormed into the local cable office and demanded a massive refund on his monthly bill because his internet service had been completely shut off. The customer service rep pulled up his account and calmly explained that the service was disconnected because he had not paid a single cent in over 3 months. The man went red in the face and argued that since he was not currently receiving any internet, he should not have to pay for the months he actually used. He claimed the company was holding his Facebook access hostage and that he deserved a loyalty discount for the inconvenience of being broke. People in the waiting room started clapping ironically as he threatened to sue for a refund on money he never even gave them. Is it really a refund if you are just asking for a prize for being a bad customer? 17. A Karen in a massive SUV stomped into the convenience store and demanded that the lone cashier come outside immediately to jumpstart her dead battery. When the young man politely explained that he was the only one on shift and did not even own a car, because he took the bus, he thought she would understand. Instead, she grew furious and demanded to speak to a manager about his extreme laziness and lack of community spirit. She claimed it was his professional duty as a retail worker to have a set of jumper cables and a functioning vehicle ready for her personal use. The shoppers in the snack aisle were filming the whole thing as she screamed that the bus system was a conspiracy to make her late for yoga. Does working behind a counter now mean you are also the official roadside assistance for the entire neighborhood? 18. An angry businessman called the corporate hotline in a towering rage because he claimed his monthly paper bill was missing the crucial second page of charges. He spent 20 minutes berating the poor girl on the phone about the lack of transparency and the absolute failure of the printing department. The representative finally asked him to flip the first page over and he went completely silent as he realized the second page was printed on the back. Instead of apologizing, he got even angrier and yelled that printing on both sides was a confusing trick designed to hide the truth from honest Americans. You could hear the entire call center laughing in the background as he hung up without saying another word. Is the concept of double-sided paper really too advanced for the modern professional mind to grasp? 19. A loudmouthed teen walked into an Olive Garden and immediately started berating the hostess because she did not greet him in fluent Italian. He made a massive scene in the lobby while claiming that the restaurant was a total imposter and that he deserved a free meal for the lack of cultural authenticity. When the manager tried to calm him down, the kid suddenly switched gears and started screaming about how this is America and everyone should speak English anyway. The logic was spinning in circles so fast that the other diners stopped eating their breadsticks just to watch the mental gymnastics. He finally stormed out while knocking over a decorative vase and yelling about the downfall of Western civilization. How can you be offended by a lack of Italian culture and then get mad that people aren't acting American enough? 20. A man walked into his local bank branch with a straight face and demanded a full refund for several $100s in fraudulent gambling charges on his account. He was literally wearing a bright red PokerStars t-shirt and was absent-mindedly clicking a professional casino chip between his fingers while he spoke. The teller pointed out that the charges came from the exact same casino he was currently representing with his outfit, but he insisted it was a coincidence. He claimed a sophisticated hacker must have stolen his identity and specifically targeted his love for Texas Hold to make the theft look believable. The security guard had to escort him out because he started trying to bet the manager that the charges were fake. If you are going to commit bank fraud, maybe don't wear the evidence as a fashion statement. 21. A middle-aged man stood by the magazine rack at the local pharmacy and began shouting that the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue was high-grade pornography. He demanded a manager come out and refund his entire morning purchase because his eyes were allegedly defiled by the sight of a woman in a bikini. He claimed this specific magazine would personally corrupt the morals of his 3 children, who were currently sitting alone in the hot car. The manager pointed out that the children could not even see the rack from the parking lot, but the man insisted the vibes were traveling through the glass. He wanted the store to pay for his gas money and his therapy sessions for the mental trauma of seeing a beach photo. Why do people think a magazine cover has the power to destroy a family from 50 feet away? 22. An entitled young woman marched up to the department store counter and slammed down a handful of clothing along with a coupon that had expired weeks ago. When the clerk politely pointed out that the offer ended on the last day of November, she laughed and said the coupon was still valid. She looked the employee in the eye and argued with total confidence that November actually has 31 days, and today was the secret extra day. The manager even pulled out a smartphone to show her a literal calendar, but she claimed the internet was biased against her shopping habits. She started a protest in the middle of the aisle while shouting that the store was stealing time from the American people. Since when did the Gregorian calendar become a matter of personal opinion for the sake of a 10% discount? 23. A man walked up to the customer service desk with absolutely nothing in his hands and tried to return a container of strawberries for being completely moldy. He had no receipt and no container, and he certainly did not have any actual strawberries to show the confused staff members. He provided a very detailed verbal description of the fuzzy white mold and expected the store to hand over $5 based on his storytelling skills alone. The clerk asked if he could at least bring the box back, but the man claimed the mold was too dangerous to transport in his vehicle. He stood there for 20 minutes describing the texture of the rot, while the line behind him grew into a small mob of angry shoppers. Do you really think a retail store operates on the honor system for decomposing fruit that isn't even there? 24. A mother walked into the electronics department looking absolutely devastated and returned a GPS unit while claiming her son had died in a car crash using it. The clerk felt a wave of pure horror and was about to offer deep condolences when he looked out the front window of the store. He saw the very same son sitting in the passenger seat of her car and scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. The woman realized she was caught and immediately changed her story while claiming she just hated the robotic voice of the navigation lady. She tried to maintain the lie of the tragedy while the clerk processed the return in total stunned silence at the sheer audacity. How do you fake a family funeral just because you don't like the way a computer says turn left? 25. A paranoid woman returned a digital bathroom scale to the hardware store because she was convinced the LED numbers were emitting deadly radiation. She claimed that every time she stepped on the scale to check her weight, she would get a massive headache from the glowing lights. The employee tried to explain that the small battery inside was not capable of powering a nuclear reactor, but she refused to listen. She brought a homemade tinfoil hat in her purse and put it on right at the counter to protect herself from the store's overhead fluorescent lights. Other customers started moving to different registers as she whispered that the government was tracking her body fat through the floor. Is it possible for a plastic scale to give you a headache? Or are you just stressed out by the number on the screen? 26. A cereal returner walked into the boutique holding a designer blouse that smelled like a combination of stale cigarettes and 3 days of heavy body odor. She claimed with a straight face that the garment had arrived in the sealed plastic bag in that exact disgusting condition. The manager pointed out a very visible wine stain on the collar that was definitely not part of the original fashion design. The woman started screaming that the warehouse workers must have been partying in her clothes before they shipped them out to her house. She demanded a full refund plus a gift card for the emotional distress of smelling like a dive bar on a Tuesday night. Do people really think that we can't tell the difference between a manufacturing defect and a wild night out on the town? 27. A young mother returned a plastic baby bib that had been melted into a small, jagged ball of colorful toxic sludge. She admitted to the clerk that she had placed the bib inside the oven on high heat because she wanted to properly sanitize it for her child. When the plastic inevitably turned into a campfire disaster, she blamed the company for not making their baby products fireproof. The employee stared at the melted lump and wondered how anyone could think an oven was a substitute for a simple sink and some soap. She demanded a replacement bib and a formal apology for the smoke alarm that went off in her kitchen during the process. Is it the manufacturer's fault that you treated a piece of cheap plastic like a Thanksgiving turkey? 28. A man walked into a local music store and tried to trade in a used personal massager for a new rock and roll CD. He placed the device on the counter and told the teenage clerk that the music would be much more satisfying for his soul than the vibration. The employee was visibly gagging and refused to touch the item while explaining that they only sell instruments and media, and definitely not used hygiene products. The man got offended and started a lecture about the artistic value of trade and how the store was being close-minded about the barter system. He even offered to let the manager test it out to prove it still had a strong motor and plenty of life left. Why would anyone think a music shop wants to swap a Taylor Swift album for your old bedroom accessories? 29. A man bought 20 pounds of frozen crab legs and accidentally left them in the trunk of his car during a record-breaking summer heatwave for 2 days. He then had the nerve to bring the leaking and buzzing bags back to the grocery store because they smelled funny and looked gray. He claimed the store sold him pre-rotted seafood and demanded a full refund because his entire car now smelled like a dumpster at the docks. The manager had to evacuate the front end of the store because the stench of the sun-baked crab was making the other customers faint. The man stood there with a mask on while insisting he was a victim of poor packaging and bad luck. Does the store really owe you money because you forgot that ice melts when it sits in a 100-degree trunk? 30. A woman walked into a kitchen supply store to return a high-end juicer because she decided she didn't want to be healthy anymore. She handed the heavy machine over to the clerk while it was still dripping with fresh orange juice and filled to the brim with wet carrot pulp. She didn't even bother to rinse it out and claimed that cleaning the machine was the store's responsibility since she was giving it back. When the manager refused to touch the sticky mess, she started pouring the leftover juice onto the counter to show how well it worked. She expected a full cash refund for a machine that looked like it had been through a vegetable war zone without a single wash. How do you have the confidence to return a dirty appliance filled with yesterday's breakfast? 31. A man walked into the sporting goods store with a confident stride and went straight to the back where the expensive fishing rods were displayed. He grabbed a top-tier graphite rod off the rack and walked directly to the customer service desk to demand a full cash refund without a receipt. The clerk had literally just watched him pick it up from the shelf 10 seconds ago and asked him why he was trying to return store property. The man didn't even blink and claimed he had bought it at a different location and just wanted to swap it for lunch money. When the manager called security, the man started yelling that his rights as a consumer were being violated by the store's lack of trust. Do people really think they can just walk in and treat a retail shop like a personal ATM with no consequences? 32. A middle-aged man walked up to the clothing return counter and tossed a pack of clearly worn and stretched-out boxer briefs at the female employee. He complained with a straight face that the fabric was way too rough and caused significant chafing on his inner thighs during his morning jog. The employee looked at the used underwear with pure disgust and explained that for hygiene reasons they could never take back clothing that had touched someone's private parts. The man got red in the face and started describing his skin irritation in graphic detail to prove that he was suffering. He even offered to show the manager the actual rash to verify that the product was a danger to the public. Since when did your personal hygiene issues become a valid reason to hand someone your dirty laundry for a refund? 33. A woman walked into the candle shop holding a large glass jar that was completely empty and black with soot at the very bottom. She told the clerk that the candle was defective and she wanted a brand new one for free because the wick had finally run out of string. The employee pointed out that the candle had clearly been burned for over 60 hours and was a finished product that had performed its job perfectly. The woman argued that since the glass was still there, the product was technically incomplete, and she should be entitled to a lifetime supply of wax. She stood there for 30 minutes accusing the company of planned obsolescence and tricking elderly women into buying things that eventually disappear. Does this lady also return her empty milk cartons because the liquid inside didn't last forever? 34. A very picky man arrived at the home improvement store carrying a brand new toilet seat that had clearly been installed and sat upon. He told the plumbing expert that he needed to return it immediately because he didn't like the way the cold plastic felt against the back of his legs. He claimed the ergonomic design was a total lie, and that his bathroom experience was now a source of deep physical and emotional stress. The worker was horrified to see that the man hadn't even bothered to wipe the seat down before bringing it back into a public building. He started a loud argument about the importance of comfort in the porcelain throne room, while other customers backed away in fear. How do you expect a store to take back a used toilet part just because your butt didn't enjoy the texture? 35. An old man marched into the middle of a Home Depot, clutching a double-barreled shotgun and demanded to speak to the manager of the firearms department. The greeter was absolutely terrified and tried to explain that Home Depot is a hardware store that sells hammers and wood, but definitely not lethal weapons. The man refused to believe him and claimed he had bought the gun in the garden section next to the lawnmowers back in the 1970s. He spent 20 minutes wandering the aisles looking for a gun rack while the police were being called by the panicked staff. He even tried to trade the shotgun for a new water heater while claiming the store had rebranded to hide from its loyal customers. Is it a sign of the times, or do you just need to check the sign on the front of the building? 36. A hipster teen walked into a thrift shop and tried to return a VCR player while claiming it was a brand new and unused vintage item. The manager looked at the device and saw that it was covered in an inch of thick gray dust and had a very prominent Blockbuster video sticker on the side. When they plugged it in a copy of the movie, Titanic was still jammed inside the machine from 25 years ago. The kid insisted that the dust was a special artistic finish and that he deserved a full refund based on the current market value of nostalgia. He got extremely offended when the staff started laughing at his attempt to sell them a piece of literal garbage from the 90s. Do you really think a sticker from a bankrupt video store makes your junk a high-end collector's item? 37. A business traveler arrived at the computer repair desk and slammed down a high-end laptop with a screen that was shattered into a million tiny pieces. He demanded a full warranty replacement because the screen had mysteriously cracked after he jammed it into a completely full airplane overhead bin. He blamed the airline and the laptop manufacturer for not making a computer that could survive being crushed by a 40-pound suitcase. The technician tried to explain that physics exists and that glass usually breaks when you apply 500 pounds of pressure to it. The man started shouting about his important files and how the store was personally responsible for his lost productivity. Why would you treat a $1,000 piece of technology like it was a piece of indestructible scrap metal? 38. A man walked into a hobby shop holding a cardboard drone box that was filled to the brim with random pine cones and some wet leaves. He explained to the stunned clerk that his expensive drone had flown into a very high tree, and he was unable to get it back down. He claimed he was returning the spirit of the drone, and that the pine cones represented the physical weight of the lost item. He expected a full cash refund so he could go buy a new one and try again, without the interference of nature. The clerk stared at the box of forest debris, and wondered if he was being pranked for a hidden camera show. The man got very emotional and said the tree had stolen his property and the store needed to make it right. Can you really blame a retail store for your inability to fly a toy? 39. A group of teenagers walked into a camping supply store and dropped a portable camping toilet onto the counter while holding their noses. They told the clerk they wanted their money back because the unit was not as easy to clean as the box had originally promised. The employee realized with a wave of pure horror that the toilet was still completely full of human waste from their weekend trip. The boys laughed and said they didn't want to deal with the smell anymore, so they thought they would just give it back to the professionals. The store had to be cleared out for a biohazard cleaning, while the manager chased the teens out into the parking lot. Since when did a return policy include a personal maid service for your used bathroom buckets? 40. A man stood at the customer service desk and demanded a refund for a kitchen mixer because he didn't like the condition of the cardboard box. The employee looked at the box and saw that it was covered in deep knife stabs and jagged tears that looked like a scene from a horror movie. The man admitted that he had gotten frustrated while trying to open the package and had used a serrated hunting knife to hack his way inside. He claimed the packaging was too difficult to navigate and that the store owed him a new one with a pristine box for his collection. The clerk pointed out that he had literally destroyed the item himself, but he insisted the manufacturer was at fault for using such strong tape. Do you really deserve a refund because you don't know how to use a pair of scissors? 41. A man walked into a local hardware store carrying a small paper bag filled with gray ash and a few charred wood splinters. He dumped the mess onto the counter and told the cashier that he wanted a full refund for the bag of firewood he bought that morning. He complained with a completely straight face that the wood had burned way too fast and did not provide the long-lasting ambiance he expected for his backyard bonfire. The employee stared at the pile of dust and explained that the entire point of firewood is to actually burn until it disappears into nothing. The man argued that the logs were clearly defective because they did not have a slow-release flame setting like a modern gas fireplace. He stood there for 10 minutes demanding to speak to the forest manager about the quality of the timber. Is it really the store's fault that you do not understand how basic combustion works in the real world? 42. A young man pulled up to a busy taco drive-thru and handed back his entire order of 3 burritos and a large soda just seconds after receiving them. He looked the cashier in the eye and demanded a full refund because he suddenly realized that he was not hungry anymore and did not want the food to go to waste. The employee explained that once food leaves the window, it cannot be resold for health reasons, but the man insisted that his change of heart was a valid consumer right. He started a massive traffic jam behind him while arguing that the company should respect his personal journey toward a healthier lifestyle. He even asked if he could trade the burritos for a gift card that he could use whenever his appetite eventually decided to return. Why do people think a fast food restaurant is a library where you can just check out a taco and bring it back later? 43. An elderly man stood in a long line at a busy boardwalk ice cream shop and finally made it to the window to demand his money back for a melting cone. He held up a sticky mess of vanilla cream that was dripping down his arm and claimed the product was defective because it started liquidizing before he even paid. The teenager at the register pointed out that the sun was nearly 100 degrees and that frozen dairy products generally tend to lose their shape in the heat. The man screamed that the shop was using a cheap formula that was designed to melt quickly so customers would be forced to buy a second one. He demanded a fresh scoop in a chilled bowl and a pack of napkins to compensate for his sticky fingers and wounded pride. Since when did the laws of thermodynamics become a corporate conspiracy to ruin your summer afternoon? 44. A man walked into a luxury shoe store wearing a pair of old beat-up sneakers that were covered in mud and had holes in the toes. He approached the return counter and pulled out a brand new shoebox and claimed that those disgusting old shoes were actually the ones inside when he bought them yesterday. The clerk opened the box and saw the man's reflection in the pristine tissue paper, while the man insisted a warehouse worker must have swapped them. He was literally standing there in the stolen new shoes while trying to get a refund for the garbage ones he brought in. The manager called the police while the man continued to argue that his old sneakers were a rare vintage model that the store should be honored to have. How do you have the confidence to commit a crime while literally standing on the evidence of your own lie? 45. A middle-aged woman marched into a craft store in the middle of March, clutching a brown and crumbling Christmas wreath that was shedding dry needles everywhere. She slammed it onto the counter and told the clerk that the holiday season was officially over, so she no longer had any use for the decoration. She claimed the wreath was defective because it had lost its vibrant green color and was now a fire hazard in her living room. The employee pointed out that it was a natural pine product that had been sitting on her door for 4 months without a single drop of water. The woman got offended and said that for $20 she expected a plant that would stay immortal until she decided to celebrate again. She demanded a full refund plus a discount on a spring bunny to make up for her holiday disappointment. Do you really think a dead tree should come with a lifetime guarantee of eternal life? 46. A man walked into a furniture store carrying a wooden table leg that had been snapped clean in half and looked very sheepish about the whole situation. He told the manager that he broke the leg while trying to hammer the piece together with a heavy metal mallet instead of using the provided screws. He asked if he could return the entire dining set because the wood was clearly not strong enough to survive his own aggressive construction techniques. The clerk appreciated his honesty, but had to explain that the warranty does not cover accidental destruction caused by a lack of reading the instructions. The man got frustrated and claimed that the manual was written in a way that challenged his masculinity and led to the violent outburst. He stood there for an hour trying to glue it back together in the middle of the showroom. Can you really blame the furniture for breaking when you treat a delicate table like a giant nail? 47. An eccentric woman returned a pair of defective garden shears to the hardware store because the spring had popped out during her first use. The clerk was about to process the exchange when the woman asked if she could keep the old broken ones in addition to getting a brand new pair for free. She claimed she liked the specific shade of orange on the broken handle and wanted to use them as a decorative art piece in her flower bed. The employee explained that the store has to send the defective items back to the manufacturer to get credit, but the woman accused them of being greedy. She started a small scene about the importance of recycling and how the store was personally contributing to the downfall of the environment. Why would you want to keep a broken tool unless you are secretly planning to build a museum of retail failures? 48. A young man walked into a software store and tried to return a physical disk for a high-end antivirus program that he had purchased an hour ago. He told the clerk that he had already installed the software on his laptop, and therefore he no longer had any physical need for the plastic disk or the box. He expected a full refund while keeping the active subscription on his computer, because he believed the disk was just a temporary delivery vehicle. The employee had to explain that once the digital key is activated, the product is officially used and cannot be returned to the shelf. The man got incredibly angry and claimed that the store was stealing his shelf space and that he was being charged for a piece of plastic he didn't want. How do you explain the concept of digital ownership to someone who thinks they can buy a pizza and return the box for a refund? 49. A mother at a local water park approached the lifeguard station with a handful of heavy rocks and a very determined look on her face. She asked if she could put the rocks into her small child's pockets so the boy would finally meet the minimum weight requirement for the most dangerous vertical slide. The lifeguard was completely horrified and explained that the weight limit exists to prevent the kid from flying off the track or getting stuck in a loop. The mother got offended and claimed the park was discriminating against small children and that her rock plan was a perfectly safe engineering solution. She demanded a refund for her day pass because the water was too wet and the safety rules were too strict for her parenting style. Since when did adding stones to a child become a safe way to handle high-speed physics at a theme park? 50. A woman walked into a clothing boutique and was absolutely shocked to see a real human employee standing at a table and folding shirts. She complained to the manager that she found the concept of human hands touching her potential clothes to be incredibly dirty and unhygienic. She demanded a refund for a sweater she bought earlier because she realized a person must have moved it from a box to the display rack. She insisted that all her clothes should be handled by sterile robotic arms and kept in a vacuum-sealed chamber until the moment she decided to buy them. The staff stared at her in total confusion while she pulled out a bottle of sanitizer and started spraying the air around the denim section. How do you plan to survive in a society where literally everything you touch has been handled by another human being? 51. A confused young man walked into the local post office and slammed a letter onto the counter while demanding to know why it had been returned to his house. The postal clerk looked at the envelope and saw a shiny silver quarter carefully scotch-taped to the top right corner where the stamp should have been. The man argued with total seriousness that he had provided the exact legal tender required for postage and that the machine should have just taken the coin. He claimed that buying a paper stamp was a redundant middleman scam and that he was a sovereign citizen who could pay with raw currency. The line of people behind him started laughing as he tried to explain that the glue on the tape was more expensive than the actual stamp. Since when did we decide that a piece of tape and a coin was a functional replacement for a government-issued postage system? 52. A woman marched back into the bookstore and threw a thick mystery novel at the cashier while demanding an immediate and full refund for her wasted time. She complained that the book was a total failure because she had already guessed the identity of the killer by page 50, and it ruined the rest of her reading experience. She blamed the author for being too predictable and the bookstore for recommending a story that did not sufficiently challenge her superior intellect. The clerk pointed out that she had still read all 400 pages of the book, but she insisted she was entitled to a refund for the emotional boredom she endured. She even asked if they had any books where the ending changes every time you read it, so she wouldn't be disappointed again. How do you expect a store to pay you back just because your brain solved a fictional crime too quickly? 53. An extremely entitled woman filed a formal written complaint at the corporate office because her local grocery store was closed for business on Christmas Day. She stated in her letter that her personal need for a half-gallon of organic milk was much more important than the holiday traditions of the employees and their families. She demanded a gift card for $20 to compensate for the stress of having to drive to a gas station to find her dairy products. The store manager called her to explain the concept of a national holiday, but she insisted that retail workers are basically public servants who should be available 24 hours a day. She even suggested that the store should leave the doors unlocked and trust people to leave cash on the counter while they were home eating turkey. Does your cereal bowl really take priority over the basic human rights of every worker in your neighborhood? 54. A very paranoid woman stormed into a retail store and started shouting that the management was pumping cinnamon-scented gas into the air vents to mind control the customers. She claimed the sweet smell was a hidden chemical agent designed to make her lose her willpower and spend her entire monthly budget on throw pillows. The manager tried to explain that the smell was coming from a harmless display of scented pine cones near the entrance, but she refused to believe such a simple story. She demanded a refund for everything she had purchased that day because she claimed she was not in her right mind when she chose the items. She even pulled out a small handheld fan to blow the air away from her face while she waited for her receipt to be processed. Since when did the smell of Christmas become a high-level government conspiracy to steal your grocery money? 55. A frustrated young woman called the customer service hotline for a trendy clothing store and spent 10 minutes screaming at the agent for being incompetent. She demanded that the company immediately mail her a copy of a specific Department of Human Services tax form so she could finish her filing. The agent tried to explain that they only sell jeans and t-shirts and have absolutely no connection to the federal government or the tax code. The woman got even angrier and claimed that since they have a website, they should have access to every document in the world and were just being lazy. She threatened to boycott the store until they sent her the paperwork and a coupon for a free pair of socks for her trouble. How do you call a fashion retailer and expect them to act as your personal secretary for the Internal Revenue Service? 56. A dad walked into a local pet shop holding a completely empty metal cage and demanded a full refund for both the enclosure and the animal that used to live inside. He explained that the hamster had escaped through the bars on the very first night, and he expected the store to either find the rodent or pay for his lost time. He claimed the cage was defective because it didn't come with a built-in tracking device to monitor the movements of a 3-inch-long creature. The store owner offered to help him look for it, but the man insisted that his house was too big and the store should just give him a new hamster for free. He stood there for an hour, arguing that the hamster was a faulty product that should have stayed in its designated area. Is it really the pet store's fault that you left the little door open and your new friend decided to explore the drywall? 57. A woman walked up to the pharmacy counter and tried to return a used pregnancy test because the result was negative and she was deeply disappointed. She told the pharmacist that she wanted her money back because the product didn't give her the news she was hoping for and therefore it didn't work for her needs. The employee explained that the test is designed to provide an accurate reading of biological data and not to act as a magic wand for your personal wishes. The woman got upset and claimed the packaging was misleading because the woman on the box looked much happier than she currently felt. She even asked if she could swap the used plastic stick for a different brand that might have a more positive outlook on her future. Do you really think a piece of medical equipment should be refundable based on how much you like the final answer? 58. An elderly woman stood at the customer service desk with a giant stack of coupons that had expired during the first term of the Obama administration. She demanded that the store give her the actual cash value of the coupons, which was printed in microscopic font as 0.001 cents. The clerk tried to explain that she would need thousands of coupons just to get a single penny, but she insisted she was a savvy investor who knew her rights. She had a calculator out and was trying to prove that the store owed her at least $3 for her collection of old paper scraps. The people in line were losing their minds as she argued about the legal definition of currency and the decline of the American dollar. Is it really worth your entire afternoon to fight for a fraction of a cent that doesn't even exist in physical form anymore? 59. A man returned a high-end kitchen mixer box to the electronics store, and the return was processed quickly because the box was perfectly resealed with professional tape. When the warehouse team opened it up later, They realized there was no mixer inside, but instead a literal heavy paving brick wrapped in old newspapers. The newspapers were dated from 1998, and the brick was covered in garden dirt and moss from someone's backyard. The store realized they had been scammed by a professional and called the man back to confront him about the missing appliance. He claimed he had no idea what a brick was, and that the factory must have run out of metal and started using stones to fill the weight requirement. Since when did people start thinking that a piece of the sidewalk was a fair trade for a $300 baking tool? 60. A man marched back into a party supply store holding a deflated helium balloon and looked absolutely furious as he slammed the limp plastic on the counter. He complained that the balloon had stopped floating after only 2 days, and he accused the store of selling him a batch of defective gravity. The clerk tried to explain that helium is a gas that naturally leaks out of porous materials over time. But the man insisted he had been cheated out of a flying toy. He wanted a full refund plus a formal apology for the emotional trauma his cat suffered when the balloon finally sank to the living room floor. He stood there for 20 minutes trying to blow air into it with his own mouth to prove that it was broken. Do you really believe that a dollar balloon should stay in the air forever against the laws of science and common sense? 61. A woman returned a large decorative wall mirror to the furniture gallery because she claimed it was defective and made her look exactly like her mother. She stood in front of the display and pointed at her own reflection while crying that the glass was cursed and was distorting her youth and beauty. The manager tried to explain that the mirror was a perfectly flat surface and was only reflecting reality, but she insisted it was a trick of the light designed to lower her self-esteem. She demanded a mirror that would make her look like she was 25 again, or she would sue the company for emotional damages. The other shoppers were trying to hide their laughter as she argued with her own image in the middle of the store. Can you really blame a piece of silvered glass for the fact that you share the same DNA as your parents? Well, there you have it. 61 reminders that common sense is officially a superpower in the modern world. If you're currently questioning how some of these people survived into adulthood without accidentally returning themselves for a refund, you're definitely in the right place. This has been another wild ride through the files of ridiculous complaints, where the customer is almost never right, but they are always hilarious. If you actually made it through that without face-palming into the next dimension, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell so you never miss another dose of retail chaos. Now, I want to hear from the frontline warriors in the comments below. What is the most unbelievable Karen-level return attempt you've ever witnessed in real life? Tell us your story, and let's keep the laughs going.